When the Texans traded up to get Will Anderson with the 3rd overall pick, some here at ESPN 97.5 and 92.5 said it was a day that will live in infamy. Jeremy Branham. I think he might have said could, whatever. We're going to say will because it's fun. Will Anderson, this year, though, has been a good player and one of the more productive rookies and more used rookies in the NFL this season. I say used because he's been on the field a lot. Most rookies don't play that much their first season, even if they are first-round picks, and even if they're top 15 picks. He has 7 sacks, 14 knockdowns, 32 pressures. He's been on the field for 65% of Texans defensive snaps, and he's had an impact on special teams. He has a blocked field goal. He has a blocked punt. The trick with Will Anderson is that, in theory, the Texans could have had a player like Will Anderson and a player like some of the ones that we're going to talk about in next year's draft as well. And on top of that, there was a paranoia that the Texans would be bad this coming season and would be potentially trading away a top 10 pick to Arizona to make it happen. Luckily, that is no longer the case. But yesterday, I saw enough people that were looking at Will Anderson and don't believe he's that good, at least based off of my estimation. And I thought to myself, let's play a game. Let's do a game called Will Anderson or This Guy on the latest episode of Houston Texans Rookie Watch.
NFL Rookie Watch.
Why didn't the Texans lose the last game of the year so they could get Bryce Young?
2023.
Why did the Texans trade up for Will Anderson?
I went through the 2023 first round. There are only 2 guys that right now, and largely due to recency bias in a post-Tank Dell world, that I would rather the Texans have than Will Anderson. Number 1, the 22nd overall pick, Ravens wide receiver Zay Flowers, who has 77 catches for 858 yards this year. If you've watched Zay Flowers play, you know he is special. He is quick and elusive in a way that very few receivers in the league are. I think he has been the best rookie wide receiver this year. Also, Vikings wide receiver Jordan Addison, I don't think he's quite as special in terms of his ability to run as Zay Flowers, but he has 66 catches for 854 yards and 9 touchdowns, and they are on what? Quarterback number 4 this year in Minnesota? Jaron Hall is the most recent one. There was Nick Mullins. There was Josh Dobbs. There was Kirk Cousins. I'm sure there was whoever came in for Kirk Cousins when Cousins got hurt.
It was Hall.
It was Hall?
They've officially circled all the way back to Jaron Hall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Addison's been very good. Those are the only 2 players that were taken after Will Anderson in the draft that I would say right now, and largely due to Tank Dell being out for the year, that I would take over Will Anderson.
Yeah, that's the thing with Zay Flowers, who has been awesome. Zay Flowers has been incredible for the Ravens. He is 5'9", 180.
Similar to Tank Dell.
So it is a little bit, I don't know if you do both of them. Or if you do both of them, now both your receivers are, 5'9".
Correct, which is not ideal.
Not ideal. But if we're just talking about, theoretically, who would be the better pick or who would be the better player, Zay Flowers, you imagine. I mean, he is playing with the MVP, but you imagine with CJ Stroud, he'd also be putting up similar production.
Correct. So those are the 2 guys that I would take over Will Anderson that were taken afterwards. Then I'm not really sure with these guys. And this is a fairly big list, but I'm not sure that I would take Will Anderson over these guys. I think I still would. 9th overall pick, Jalen Carter with the Eagles. By the way, per Pro Football Reference, his nickname is either Baby Rhino or Breadman. That's interesting.
Two solid ones.
I like Breadman. That's a good one.
I kind of like Baby Rhino.
He has played well this year. He has 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. I still think you got to wonder about his maturity. But I do think that you could make an argument that Jalen Carter is better than Will Anderson. After that, a couple of other defensive linemen who have been putting up similar production. If you're playing defensive tackle and you get 4 sacks and you're playing almost half the snaps, okay, maybe if you watch the film, you could make a compelling argument for these guys being better than Will Anderson. So, Bucs defensive tackle Kalijah Cansey has 4 sacks. He's played 61% of the snaps for the Bucs when he's been on the when he's been healthy this year. And Saints defensive tackle Brian Breesy has 4.5 sacks. He's played 48% of the snaps. I'm not going to watch the film and compare these guys. I still think I would take Will Anderson over both of those guys because of the Alabama connection. But those guys have been pretty good, drafted later on in the draft. Theoretically, you could trade back. You could draft them. Again, we're playing with Captain Hindsight benefit here, though. Then after that, Seahawks wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm not sure that he's in the same conversation as Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. I think we'll find out for sure next year. Year 1 to year 2 is usually when rookies make the biggest jump. He has 60 catches for 614 yards this year, but he also plays with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I think I'd take Will Anderson over Jackson Smith-Njigba based off of what we've seen thus far. I also think that there are perhaps more special wide receivers at Ohio State than him, specifically Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll see where he gets drafted in this year's coming draft. Devin Witherspoon, the 5th overall pick, a cornerback. The tricky thing here is you probably were never going to draft a cornerback that early because you just drafted Derek Stingley in the top 5. Witherspoon has been good this year. He had that one game, I think it was a Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. It was a nationally televised game. I want to say it was against the Giants where he had a pick 6, and he played very well. I think he had a sack too. 16 deflected passes. If you have two corners that you draft in the top 5 in back-to-back drafts, you are in pretty good shape. But at the same time, you're not paying Steven Nelson that much money. Maybe that changes this coming offseason, but based off of what James Bradbury didn't get with his good year that he had with Philadelphia, I don't think that he's going to get a lot of money in the offseason. So I think that you probably take Anderson over Witherspoon, but it's more about what you were looking for. Same argument I'd make for Christian Gonzalez, who the Patriots took 17th overall. He played 4 games. Everyone loved him in those 4 games, but it was just 4 games he tore his labrum. And Giants cornerback Deonte Banks, he's played 84% of snaps for the Giants. At the very least, he's on the field. If you're a rookie playing on the field, even as a corner, that's pretty good. So watch the film. Maybe you prefer those guys. Those are the only ifs. The rest, the remaining 19 players taken after Will Anderson, I take Anderson pretty quickly, either because he's better or because there's guys that were drafted at a position like tackle. You have Titus Howard and Laramie Tunsil, or running back, where if you're drafting a running back early on, you better be pretty close to contending. The Falcons drafting Bijan Robinson was a good pick. Robinson's been great, but do you take him? Would you want Bijan Robinson, or would you want a defender with Will Anderson's potential in the top 10? Same thing for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, especially with what Singletary's done.
Right, Singletary's been pretty good this year.
That's like the entire, like those 3 things, 3 guys are the reasons like you don't take running backs that high if you're a team like the Texans were last year, where you know it wouldn't have been smart because what they've got now is Singletary and they've signed him for the minimum.
Right, exactly. So I'd also say this: there were 5 defensive ends taken after Will Anderson. He's been clearly better than all of them. Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, Will McDonald, Miles Murphy, and Felix Anudike Uzuma. So there you go. You're taking Will Anderson over the majority of the players that were selected the remainder of this year's draft. I guess you do have the ability to say, well, there's guys they could have taken with the other picks that they traded. You'd have the potential to have more players, but Anderson has been a very good pick with that 3rd overall pick for all those naysayers out there.